How's it going? It's the second time recording this. Take the lens cap off. Yeah, how's it going? I've been away for a bit. I've been touring around a bit of Europe, Poland, Prague, with my partner and some friends. It's been really good fun. I did take the rhythm with me, just to kind of I don't know. So I figured like I'd work on maybe a live set like for November, and just kind of being around people that make music. I thought, you know, maybe it's a good idea. Didn't get on the machine a massive amount, but did get a few decent sessions just on the kitchen table, on the floor, where I could find some time, some space, and kind of got this thing going. I've kind of tweaked it a little bit since I've back, not massively. Yeah, kind of got some, I don't know, some stuff that works, some stuff that maybe doesn't, some kind of new directions that I probably wouldn't normally go in normally, like some sort of sound designy stuff. It's definitely got a bit of a Puerto Rick's Mike Parker kind of vibe going on, which I'm not going to worry about too much. I kind of find that when I'm kind of looking for a particular sound and you hear it in other people's music, it's always this weird kind of mix. Is it like, are you trying to find the sound and then you find it, or are you kind of inspired by a sound and therefore your sound changes? I kind of think it's a bit of a 50-50 sometimes. So I definitely like that kind of like broad synthesis, sort of like brassy kind of, you know, I don't know, like, oh, I thought that was reverb, but it's a dog outside. Always a dog outside. Yeah, like whether it's that kind of like sort of brassy textured sort of sound that you can kind of create and kind of manipulate in kind of lots of different areas. It's like a rich, like it's got lots of frequencies already to begin with, and that kind of helps, you know, create track structure, create sort of sound sculpting. And I kind of find that with square waves, the kind of Mike Parker stuff, Puerto Rick stuff, a lot of stuff that's full of noise, like old Stefan Becky stuff as Pole, loads of the early Scape stuff, like some of the early 12K stuff with texture. Just like, you know, there's an abundance of music that kind of has kind of a bedding of texture and sound, and kind of trying to get that in a lead sound, like through, you know, like I say, like a square wave or something. It's kind of interesting. In this case, I'm really digging the bass drum plastic, I think it's called, BD plastic. Like, it just has this ability to be both a kick drum and a kind of like an oscillator at the same time, and you can kind of you can really get some different sculptability in the parameters that are there, and I kind of sometimes find the parameters within that engine can kind of be a bit I don't know, a bit like you're kind of trying to find a sound, whereas I've been kind of hooking up settings, like parameters, to the modulation setup page, which is just great, and just being able to kind of quickly find those parameters that you like and then have them just in a simple layout. And it's the interesting thing about this is it's always the same layout, you know, different parameters maybe, but it's always these 4 dials regardless of where you're at. So it just kind of creates a sense of familiarity, which I really appreciate, and I can kind of concentrate more on what I'm listening to, as opposed to having to, you know, consider, oh, this engine's got like this thing over here and this thing over there. You know, when you go to the specific sort of source pages, it might be doing different stuff, right? So kind of finding that's quite cool. Also, just reusing the same engine on multiple tracks. So I've got like the sort of BD plastic on both of these 2 tracks. You can't put it on, like, you can only put it on tracks 1, 2, 3 and 4, and obviously 3 and 4 have this kind of choking thing going on. So other sounds, other engines like are available, but it would be nice to kind of have it across the whole thing. So this kind of brings me to this sound, which is actually started off being, can you hear that dog? You probably can't hear it, but I can, and it's a new one. It's a new resident. It likes to bark. Anyway, yeah, this has got like a kind of, let me have a look. What have we got going on here? Oh no, it's a sample. That's right. This one was using sort of the bass drum plastic engine originally, and not being, like I say, not being able to put it on the other pads. I figured like I can kind of take like a riff or take a sound and put it on the other pads as a sample. But often, as is the case when you start going into samples, you've got all this other flexibility to manipulate. So I've kind of like got quite a complex wave that's a combination of the samples that are in here. I was kind of scrolling through some sounds that I put in, which is I think the plastic loop is based off the BD plastic, and then the M32-2 I think must be the Mother 32 concept quadruple zeros, a bit of a old Richie Hawtin ripoff. It sounds pretty crap, but it had some interesting. It had a kick drum and stuff in it, and electric beat I think is perhaps a new sample as well. So just kind of manipulating and just kind of scrolling through those created this waveform, which is kind of fun because you can have you can kind of scan through it. If we I know why it's not playing, because I've put the volume on here. There we go. Yeah, so like this is just kind of like through the effects, and then I've turned off the sort of direct signal on here. But if I turn the direct signal on, you can kind of hear what I'm on about. There's some crazy bass. I'm thinking it's this. I don't know where that bass is coming from actually. There we go. Let's just stop it. It kind of sounded cool though. I think it's probably from the reverb, to be honest, or the delay, because I've got the delay going up pretty high. Yeah, it is. It sounded cool though. Yeah, so this is kind of moving around and creating some textures, and with the reverb, you've got this sort of, distant kind of watery, but just sort of sound design texture sort of thing. I was kind of thought about this because I was watching an artist while we were on tour, and they were playing in this forest, and these kind of speakers strapped to the trees, and they had just loads of reverb and loads of sound design stuff, and I thought, you know what, I don't really do that very often, if at all. And I thought, it might be kind of cool, kind of fun, just to kind of play around with that, just to see I don't know how that sounds or how I might use it in my own stuff. It's always just good to try different things, try different directions. I think I've been hesitant before because it's like, I don't know, like it doesn't sound like you. It can't, when you hear something else or hear somebody else, and you kind of appreciate it, but it doesn't sound like you. And I kind of figured, I want to kind of push this idea of what I am anyway. And just kind of try different stuff. So this is kind of like, if I turn the reverb down a bit, and then you can kind of hear, the reverb kind of works in amongst the track because it's just creating this bedding, but on its own it's a bit of a joke. But you can kind of hear all these little textures, and this is kind of like on a bandpass filter idea with some envelope, so it's kind of not dealing with the bass and stuff too much, although you can change the center point. So I thought it was quite flexible, like it can kind of take you in a place pretty quickly without having to, program too much. So I'm kind of going to, I don't use the sampler much in this because I don't know why actually. I think I kind of want to just like really get to grips with the synthesis because it's something quite unique to this box. And I don't know, like I've used samples like since I was like ridiculously young. Like I think the first time I was even programming music, like at 10 years old, I was using like techno turbo sound on the Amiga. So sampling's like been there for me since the very beginning, and I've always kind of synthesized sounds and then sampled them to kind of free up memory normally. Or to, you want a couple 101s and you only have one, so you can sample it, that kind of idea. And you can kind of, and going for a whole kind of clicks and cuts era, like post 2000, getting really heavy into kind of DSP computer manipulation of samples. This has got something unique, and it's got a sampler, but I guess it's quite limited on the surface, but I want to challenge that biased opinion I have and kind of play around with it and see how, kind of extreme frequencies might perform with the filters and everything in there, because everything has its own kind of sound really. So yeah, this was kind of been interesting. It does, like, this machine gets really kind of high, like really like high frequency, like it's kind of high crackly kind of fuzziness that you can, especially when you're overdriving it, which I don't really know anything else that's quite sounds like that. Even the Model Cycles doesn't really do that. It has it crunches and distorts in its own way. This really sort of gets fizzy, especially with the sort of waveforms, like all the beady plastic going up there. Specifically like this one, right? What have we got? This sound here. I think we need to turn the settings up on this as well, maybe. Oh no, it's there. It's just insanely high. Yeah. So this one, like, it's like really buzzy, but it's not sort of ear piercing at the same time. And you can kind of push this more so it crackles. It's got this sort of really nice but nasty yeah, sounds pretty cool. So I'm kind of liking that. I want to kind of have that bass drum plastic buzz across everything, just to kind of, I was thinking actually maybe to have the kind of if I go to a track that's not being used, the sort of notch filter, and just have multiples of these. So maybe have like the same sample mapped across all the pads, and then each one has a slight different increment of this, like proper phaser style, and then maybe modulating them, or maybe have like a, the more Mac to the quick performance amount or something, or just on LFOs or something, just to kind of have, maybe some are like slightly different sound, or slightly different timing, or maybe the waveforms are slightly off, or this kind of thing. So, and different pannings maybe, so having this real kind of crazy, kind of washed out, sort of phasery kind of quality, based off effectively one sound. And the reason I'm thinking about doing that, as opposed to what I've got here, which seems to be sort of quite different sounds and layers, which is not, I don't really normally do that, or haven't done for, at least in this kind of music. I do it in other stuff, but makes me sort of, I don't know, I like working from like one kind of core block of stuff, core block of sound, and then try to sort of like pull it and morph it and kind of extrapolate it into different rhythmical ideas and different sonic, frequency ideas. So maybe I'll do that and focus on like this kind of, this kind of main one that feels like pretty sort of, techno kind of sounding, especially when you go up on these kind of high bits. Yeah, kind of, it's got a lot of power there just on that one sound. So this is, again, BD Plastic is basically the same pattern, I believe, as number 2, but whereas number 2 is a bit more kind of abstract, broken, a bit more stereo panning, and a bit more kind of like the rhythm's not really like rigid, it's just kind of all over the shop. And then I'm kind of using this filter frequency just to kind of like bring it in and out kind of thing, to go from high fizz to like some more low pass. Well, it's actually a high pass, but bringing the filter down. This one on the other hand is a lot more like your like classic, like locked in thing, although still rhythmically quite, broken, which I always prefer. Yes, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know if I'm pretty sure this won't be what it is when I finally get to play out, but for the first time in a while, I kind of feel like I'm a bit apprehensive about sort of it being too obviously techno-y sounding, if that sounds weird. I kind of want it to have like the energy that sort of techno stuff can have, but not the danceability, like not the kind of conventional conformity, like sort of social thing that sort of dance music has kind of really become. Or maybe it always was, but that's not how I engage in it. I like that listening experience that's kind of rhythmically repetitive, has those sort of references to techno, but also could really be other things at the same time, like fundamentally like electronic music. And then the genres can sort themselves out, like, just kind of using them as kind of ballparks. So having something that feels like that's challenging in the space, but there's enough familiarity there. Maybe people that are into techno might get it, people that are into electronic stuff might get it. If there's some bass, people like bass that might get it. And if no one gets it, then it doesn't fucking matter, does it? Like, at least I'll have some fun. So yeah, kind of playing around with that, and maybe just have essentially like one kind of core idea that I'm just sort of exploring in the nuances. Because even just some of those parameters, like, this is, I could kind of listen to this for a while, and you can hear that reverb or that delay or whatever that is feedback in the background. I think it might be the delay because I've turned it up, but it could be the reverb. Yeah, I think it's the reverb actually. Well, who knows what it is? It doesn't really matter, does it? Sounds cool. That bedding, and kind of bringing this filter envelope up. You can kind of go from like bassy, like I like that feeling when you're listening to someone play and it kind of maybe sounds a bit dull or muted, and then it's just occupying one frequency. I think a lot of music, it's just a massive like hyperbolic statement here, but it can tend to be occupying every flipping frequency all the time. I kind of wonder why that is. Maybe it's just the way people are being taught about sound and what's kind of the style, maybe, education in general perhaps, but I really like stuff that occupies like a thinner range of frequencies, but then at small changes like that, you kind of back up to a whole other area. So what was just a bass can now become like percussive and more like the kind of stab and hi-hat kind of frequency area. I kind of think that the power of having sounds that can potentially go in all areas, it creates a lot of space in the whole listening experience, that you're kind of taken into muffled lows and weird clicks and textures, and then you can bring up treble on bass, and it's just this kind of, the noise floor has been brought up, and then you can bring up the filters and you've got this really bright sound, or the extreme highs, and just kind of exploring those and enjoying those for what they are, as opposed to thinking it must have sub and it must have mids and it must have this and it must have pan and it must, like, feel like a lot of tracks just have too much of everything. So yeah, kind of liking this. Oh yeah, also that in the background is the effects. So something I've been kind of playing around occasionally but often forget is you probably know this, but it's easy to forget that the effects have its own track. And it's very powerful in terms of what you can do to manipulate rhythmical kind of perception. This is like basically doing, I don't even know what that's doing actually. What is it doing? It must be doing something. Maybe it's resetting or something. Yeah, it's resetting. So all that's doing is re-triggering a rhythmical setting on the high pass filter from, I believe, the delay. Yeah, the delay. So you get this, and then I've kind of got this like the fading, like the fade in, fade out, I think, of that, like the extremities of that modulation, just to give it like as if it's sort of more complicated than what it is. So I quite like that, and it's on its own different timing, so it's 16 and the actual sounds like on 5 steps, so 15 to 16 doesn't quite go, so 5 to 16 doesn't quite go, so you're always getting moved on, which I really like that technique because it just prolongs the sense of a loop in some ways, and in other ways it doesn't give you the sense of like a fixed idea of when something begins and when it doesn't, or when it begins, when it ends. It just kind of you just kind of lock into more the micro or the macro, if that makes sense, in sense of the rhythm. So that da-da-da might be the thing that you're waiting to come round, or it might be the intense da-da-da-da-da thing inside that you're listening to go around, or it might be, you know, that thing I was doing earlier with the buzzy stuff of it filters down. It might be that. So you've got these like different sort of layers of tempo, and there, because there's so many kind of combinations of that you can do, you can kind of lead the listener into following one or following the other one, or maybe they're following one but you're following the other one. So you get this a really weird sort of sometimes trance-like, sometimes kind of broken feeling, and I think that kind of, for me, kind of is what sort of hits against dance, that kind of 4/4, you know, groove, like danceable stuff. It's a bit more like, how do I move to this? How do I feel about this? Which, you know, I kind of like, you know, dancing's all well and good and being euphoric and stuff, and having literal linear snare drums going, come on, you're going to get excited. And, you know, but I feel it's a bit fucking patronizing, honestly. But yeah, you know, I think it's nice to try different stuff. So, yeah, so I think that's the bulk of it. I don't know, there's this sound, that's right. Very simple, which is basically like impulse, which is great. Can be quite difficult to work with, I find, on this. It kind of feels sometimes like it's never doing quite what you want, and then you leave it and you come back to it and you think, oh, that sounds quite good, and then it seems to be inconsistent. I know if you have the filters high, the resonance high on the filter, you're going to get inconsistent amounts where it's kind of building, and it seems to have its own. I've noticed in some situations it almost has its own cycle to the resonance, which I wonder what's going on inside to dictate self-oscillation, but there feels like this own rhythm in there. So that sometimes can be interesting and also pain in the ass, but I've dropped it down a bit more on this, and then I have like, I think from memory, oh no, I removed it. Yeah, I did remove it. I did have some stuff in there, but it's a bit of it reminds me a bit of like the music album, like Richie Hawtin's Plastic Man music album, just some of that kind of like shuffling stuff. Wasn't intentional. This was kind of a sub before, but I was just playing around with that kind of sound design idea, just having slightly higher frequencies and stuff. But again, I kind of like it just on its own. Just simple stuff like that, just playing around with it, you know, it just sort of sets a mood, and it feels kind of confident in itself without having to like create a track, so to speak. It's just like some rhythmical stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how this, like the different iterations of this, whatever this becomes, if this even is what I play, or whether there's different versions, and what the ultimate structure is. But it's very much early stages, but some kind of solid, promising sounds. But I thought, yeah, I'll just jump on, make a video, share with you like where I'm at with it, and that feeling of like, I'm not really sure. Like, yeah, YouTube tends to be full of well executed, pristine performances of, you know, niceness, I guess, like very pseudo positive a lot of the time. And I think, I don't know about you, but creating music is not, it does not feel anything fucking like that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's hard. It's like hard work, and you can have lots of self-doubts, and it can be challenging. There's so many directions you can go in. And I don't think that ever really changes. I mean, maybe if you're Autecher and you're doing all right, then maybe it does. But you know, I just don't buy it. I think there's always like the struggle of trying to get a good sound and get it to kind of where you want it to be at some level at some point. That's going to kind of keep re-emerging as you just try to craft your thing. If it doesn't, you're probably complacent. You're probably just doing the same thing. If you're pushing, then you're going to have to challenge yourself to challenge others. So yeah, I kind of thought like I want to do more videos like that are like just more struggle, and I think it's interesting to pair up like how I'm sort of explaining how I feel about it, and yet what it sounds like, because it does sound okay, right? It probably sounds, to some of you it probably sounds amazing, to some of you it probably sounds pretty mediocre. and that's the point. It's like it's just down to the individuals, and trying to not get your emotions in the way, but use them. I think it's kind of interesting. So yeah, I'm going to do some more like around this as I work towards. I think the performance is November 5th in London, so down in Deptford, if I remember my dates correctly. I've got it in my calendar, but so I've got a bit of time in terms of like where this might go, and I'll try to share where I'm at with it. I think it's almost certainly going to be the rhythm. I think maybe I bail out and use the laptop, I don't know, but I'm thinking rhythm, and I'm thinking the Mo2 for some external EQ. This is running through the Mo2, by the way. I should say that there's a little bit of EQ just to dial out that muddiness, like you probably will suffer from using that just a bit. See if I can see what. Yeah, it's like it's just that kind of just sort of like the 200 300 hertz range that's just kind of knocked out, and then a bit of the mid highs kind of brought up just to get it a bit more settled, and then I can run this through the Mo2 in a live situation, I'm thinking. So I've got that kind of slightly cleaner sound, and I don't have to worry too much about a mixer. I might take a mixer as well, though. Some of that stuff of like being able to turn off the, you know, that's pretty cool, being able to just have the effects. And if you've got the effects balanced in a way, you've got this real washed out of sound. But I would really like volumes instead of just on-offs, and you can do that with the individual outs plugging into an external mixer. So I just have stereo of the effects and then individual tracks, which I can play around with, the kind of wet and dry idea. So we'll see. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave it here. Hope you found this kind of useful. It's certainly useful for me, just kind of talking through the stuff and hearing how fucking muddled my brain is. But yeah, I'm going to do some more rhythm stuff, probably do some model cycle stuff. I've got a friend who's going to lend me his model samples, so I'm going to badger him for that, see if I can get that. Somebody else said Elektron should send me some equipment to use, but like, you know, I don't know. It seems I feel compromised. But maybe, right? Because it saves me having to fucking buy their expensive gear, and then we can work out and push it to some limits. So we'll see. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it there, and I'll catch you next one. Nice one.